to work with Savannah State. And now we are live. We're starting recording now. We'll be live streaming in a second through Facebook. So all this content will be available online for anybody that wants to see it. You let me know, Coco, when we're streaming so that I can do the formal introduction.
Good to go.
I'm good to go. All right, so thank you so much. Thank you everybody here. Thank you everybody on the internet or in the future. This is Luis Zaldivar. I am Associate Director of Organizer with Deep Center. And this is Digital Policy, Discovering the Political Process Through Social Media. Our event today is in partnership with Savannah State University. We are very happy to work with them and with everybody that is going to jump into this conversation for the next hour or hour and a half, depending on the questions that we have. Coco, if you can put on the slides to have as background while we do the introductions here. So first, I will talk a little bit about Deep Center, who we are, what we're about. Deep Center is our mission is to empower Savannah's young people to thrive as learners, community leaders, and agents of change. Through creative writing, cultural production, and art, Deep creates platforms for the city's youth and the village of support around them, including their families and adult allies, to share stories, engage in debates, and make Savannah a more just and equitable place. Deep Center's framework is anti-racist, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. We promote a root cause model of youth and community development that works on 3 parallel tracks. We do direct service, we do systems change, and we do narrative change. Deep lifts youth and their village, advocates for just policies, and disrupts dehumanizing narratives with first-hand stories about youth and their families healing, growing, and thriving through individual growth and collective action. Tonight's event is Digital Policy, Discovering the Political Process Through Social Media. And this is a training session that will have basically the following components. The first one is how to create social media plans and events for community fellowships. The second one is how to interpret digital analysis, trends, and algorithms, or any information around that our panelists can give us. How to use AdWords and marketing strategies to benefit the campaign that we're working on, and to talk about a little bit about community engagement, and what is the best way to go about it from y'all's perspective. We wanted to host this event to really teach the importance of digital media and influence on community development, mobilization, because this is something that we'll keep on seeing the more and more, especially now that we're all being distanced because of the pandemic, but it's definitely something that has been going on for a while. Also, the use of tools and community engagement in order to create more politically focused citizenship, and youth leadership. To us, that is very important on how we move around this. So today we have the following panelists that are joining us with their experiences to kind of discuss a little bit about these issues. We have Zach Dennis, who is the digital director of Savannah Morning News. We have Marcelo Stewart, political consultant, local here in Savannah. We have Ashley Newton, who is a former consultant for Congressman John Lewis. We have Ava Pittman, who's a journalist with News Nation in New York. I'll have a few ground rules before I let our panelists take this on this event. The first is that our events ultimately center experiences around youth. So we will prioritize young people as the questions that they have. We have young people right now on the event on Zoom, and we will have young people talking to us in our Facebook Live that is going on. So our tech support, Coco Papi, Director of Policy, is behind the Zoom right now, and she will she will have any questions that is found in the Facebook for us as well. We have to be conscious of time, so that we ask everybody who has a question to wait until the end and use a virtual hand emoji if you're in the Zoom to raise a questions or any concerns that you might have while we do this. There is no black screen shaming. That means that anybody that doesn't want to show their video, they are welcome to do so. This event will be recorded for teaching and learning purposes. If you do not wish to be recorded, we recommend being off camera. We ask you to be curious, not definitive. Prioritize questions and not statements. step up and step back. This means that if you feel like you're talking a lot, please step back and allow others to speak their mind as well. And lastly, I just would like to remind you the order of events. After this introduction that I just gave, we're gonna go through the panelists to just introduce themselves really quickly with an opening question that I'm gonna bring about. Then we're gonna have a brief discussion back and forth with a couple of questions that we're gonna have. And we're gonna have then the Q&A with the panelists. And then we'll be closing with the future flyers and sign-ups. So with that, before we go into the panelists, we have a short video that we want to show in order to open this conversation. So if you will help us, Coco, with that video right there, we will really appreciate it. Let's go.
It does not look like the video is working, so why don't we just move on?
We're gonna do plan B then. You can get off the PowerPoint if you like. All right, so I see Monchelle is here. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna just ask you to introduce yourself really quickly with this opening question. It's from 1 to 10, how important social media is today for you, and how do you think it engages with your work? You know? So let's start with Ashley Newton. You were here first, so I will pick on you. Anna, thank you so much for joining us, and please tell us your pronouns and your background as well.
Yes, hi. My name is Ashley Newton. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I have been involved in fundraising, political fundraising, event planning, and scheduling for almost 20 years, dating myself. But I primarily worked on political campaigns all around the country in the Southeast at all levels, from grassroots to presidential campaigns, for about 12 years. And then I moved into nonprofits and issue advocacy. And now I work for a Fortune 500 corporation, but volunteer my time doing those awesome grassroots kind of fundraising things. Now I'm actually just became the fundraising chair for my local party. So coming full circle now. I would say social media definitely is extremely important to the work that I do. But that's good and bad, which I think we'll get into those conversations soon. But did you want us to, on a rating scale, I would say an 8 for sure.
It's an 8. That's quite a bit. Thank you so much for the introduction. Ava Pittman, I have you on my screen next, so I would like to pick you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, and from 1 to 10, how important is social media in your work?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ava Pittman. My pronouns are she, her. I am a field producer for News Nation here in New York. My career started right there in Savannah, Georgia, actually at Savannah State University with Tiger Eye News, and then to WJCL, and then to New York. How important social media is to my job? I would say it's about 95% of my job. Yes, and you can tell that through our officials as well. They've also kind of transferred into the social media sphere and getting their press releases out, and that's how we get our breaking news. And of course, we have to confirm it through reputable resources. But so from 1 to 10, I would say a 10 for sure.
Wow, thank you so much for that. The next one on my screen is Zach Dennis. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. Same thing, just quick introduction, and from 1 to 10, how important is social media in your job?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Zach. I have been here at the Savannah Morning News for about the last 5 years. Been in news probably the last 7 or 8. From 1 to 10, I'd probably say 10, because of that I get paid for my social media skills. So it's very important. But also it's just very important because, you know, working in news today, just the way that we get information has drastically changed over the last 10 years. I mean, you used to have just a handful of modes of communication, whether it was TV, newspapers, radio, what have you. And now we literally open the floodgates to everything. And so understanding how those floodgates work and how to work those systems to your benefit is crucially important to getting information out in today's age.
And that's why we're doing this. Thank you so much, Zach, for your time today. And our last panelist is Savannah's own Marcelo Stewart. So Marcelo, thank you so much for joining us, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how important is social media in your work from 1 to 10.
Hey, how's it going? Marcelo Stewart. I'm a political consultant and worked many political campaigns here in Savannah and on the state level. And so it's funny, if you'd asked me this just a few years ago, I would have still said it's growing, maybe not as important as I thought it was, but COVID really taught me how important social media was. So it's extremely important. It's extremely important to targeting voters and to maximizing impact for advertising when you're trying to reach people. And so I've been consulting for about 10 years. And over the last 2 years, I've seen a very mass push of more or less doing your campaigns online. So it's extremely important.
All right, so we've established that this event is the most important thing anybody could possibly be listening to at this exact moment. Thank you so much for that. No, thank you, Martina, who is our youth organizer, for choosing the topic and bringing this group together. So the first question that I will just kick things off is regarding to like all the different tools of social media, right? So by now we're all familiar, with, I don't know, 5, 6 apps, that we all have in our phones, or especially young people having their phones, So the question is, how is it been your experience with these different tools, and what do you use them for? So how is it that the social media process has changed also over time? Because I remember the days that as an organizer, I used to just use Facebook, and I thought that was the most advanced thing in the planet, right? But now, as it turns out, that is just not enough. So I will use the same order that we just used for the introductions to kind of kick off the question. How have you engaged with the different types of social media? What do you think is most effective, and how it has changed over time? Ashley, I will start with you. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think that things have evolved a lot when it comes to the different platforms. I also started in Facebook and thought, wow, this is so cool. But now there are so many different types of social media. So I feel very strongly that you have to know your audience and target your audience and have very specific messages for each platform based on the people that you're trying to reach. This past fall, I was one of the chairs of Women for Biden and our national campaign to help elect President Biden. And we knew we had sort of different groups based on the different people that we were targeting. So while we did a lot of Facebook messaging to reach people my age, we also did a lot of Instagram and TikTok and things that we knew would reach different age groups. So I think it's really important to be mindful of who you're looking to motivate and get involved when you choose which outlet you should focus on.
And what, as far as youth, which one has been most effective in Europe to you?
Definitely, I see in the events that I've worked in that Instagram and TikTok are more motivating for youth. They definitely tend to trend toward those. I have a lot of our young Democrats who tell me, don't post it on Facebook, we won't be able to come because we'll never see it. So definitely Instagram seems to be the middle ground where you can reach most everyone.
The middle ground, everybody loves that, right?
Right.
Before we keep on going, I would just like to emphasize that Deep Center is a non-partisan organization, so we do not advocate for any specific party or candidates. These are all experiences that all of our panelists have, and enrich the conversation. Ava, the same question: how is it that you have been able to juggle through all the apps, and what has been most important for you to reach out to youth?
So for me, I would say, I would kind of start in 2008. I would say Facebook and Instagram were some of the most widely used platforms to get political messages out for the candidates at that time. But this last election was definitely TikTok. It just kind of emerged into the scene, and that was more of our Gen Z that kind of pushed that messaging out for actually both platforms, but for the winner of our last election. So I would say definitely TikTok has emerged as number one for us to monitor, and then Instagram and Facebook is still very useful. Hashtags have always been super helpful for candidates to get their messaging out. And then I agree with her with knowing your audience, know who you're speaking to, understand the needs of certain people, and understand that what you think is important is not necessarily what, you know, residents think is important in their community. So I agree with that.
All right, we're starting getting into the monster of TikTok. Well, I have strong feelings about that. It's hard to make those videos. People think it's easy. I'm just saying. Zach, same question. How you're juggling through the apps? What has been most effective to you, especially for youth?
Yeah, I mean, kind of to echo what Ashley Neva said, knowing your audience is really the key. Like knowing who you're talking to and how you're wanting to present that information is really what's important, because, you know, like in the news world, a lot of the times we're just punting Facebook because that's becoming just so algorithm based that they don't want, you know, local news really popping up there that often. And so we've just kind of punted that. Twitter is so algorithm heavy and that audience is not always there. And so we found a lot of return on platforms like Instagram, because we want to not only engage with that younger audience, but we also want to show, you know, I work at a newspaper, and I would, you know, like to know how many people who are on Instagram know what a newspaper or TikTok know what a newspaper looks like or feels like. But we want to present that information in a way that's concise and in-depth and conducive to that platform. And so we've played with a lot of different things to go, this is where you're at. Let's also present this information in a way that you're engaging with it on that platform. And so thinking in that way, thinking kind of how you can get that information to people in the best way is also something to think about as well.
All right, we started talking about algorithms now. That's a big one, you know? We'll go back to that, yeah? Marcelo, what's your take on this conversation?
Well, that's a tough one for me, you know. Fortunately, I think it's about knowing your audience and knowing your candidates. And so several candidates that I've worked with have been of the older generation. So using the Facebook have worked well, even though I think I would rate Instagram better for the things that we try to do. We haven't used TikTok as much, even though I keep hearing that that's probably the way I need to go. But Facebook has been really good for us, and Instagram, and paying for those Facebook those ads have been really great. And the thing about the reason why it's so important, because you don't need big money to run a political campaign through the social media side compared to the traditional ways of the radio, TV. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but many of us could go all day long without watching TV, maybe, you know, and even radio for me. Once I put on Spotify, I probably don't hear no commercials. But on social media, you would probably run across social media at some point during the course of the day. And so I think either the platforms are great. I've been really successful with using Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you so much. And, you know, we're talking about knowing your audience, right? That's one theme that has been gone through all of your takes. So one of the reasons why we're making this event is for young people to have a better feel of how they can go about creating a social media campaign. One of the target audiences for a lot of community engagement campaigns is older people. So our question is, what will be your advice for young people that want to do a targeting campaign towards older people, towards older folk? And Ashley, I will start with you.
That's a good question. It's actually come up a lot recently in some of the fundraising events that I've been working on. Excuse me. And we're having kind of a debate of if people are almost overwhelmed by social media at times, and we've seen a resurgence of traditional platforms coming back. So again, knowing that target audience, I would say it depends on the age range, but Facebook and Instagram are great, but it's also hard to know who you're engaging with and what that response is going to be. So I say that it has to be twofold, that you can't just do social media and get the response that you're expecting, that you still need to call people. Phone banking is still an extremely effective way to organize politically. It's, as far as motivating people to vote, it's one of the most effective tools. Email is still, if it's personal, is still an effective way to reach some people, especially if you're looking at people outside of Gen Z, maybe. Text banks and more personal communication is often a great follow-up. So I think that to be successful, it has to be a twofold plan: social media and some more personal way to follow up.
I hear that, and that's also something that I've seen a lot. You know, with my parents, maybe that we see a lot of folks, you know, craving other types of communication as well that are not the same as sending a tweet, you know. But in a way, that is also outreach, right? I mean, that's part of what we have to do, you know. Ava, do you agree with Ashley on her assessment? Is there anything you would like to add about reaching out to older generations?
No, I agree with her. If you ask someone from an older generation, you know, they are traditional and they still pick up a newspaper. They prefer boots on the ground. They prefer door knocks. They love phone calls because they want to know more about you. They want you to explain to them your platform. So yes, social media is the way, but for our older generation, I would say kind of stick to the traditional form for them. It's just easier to connect with them on that way.
Zach, you work for a paper. Do people still have papers? You know?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's not to be morbid, but the only times we really lose subscribers is when they die. So you know, they still have papers. But I mean, it's so I don't know. I'm cheating in this question because I have the easiest form to I feel like to get to them. But there's also ways to kind of like take that and like kind of twist it into a new way. I think that we found a lot of success with like newsletters because that kind of keeps the format of like traditional of like how you would read or scroll through a newspaper, but is still online in your, you know, directly in your email coming to you. I would also like to echo the point of, you know, calling people and reaching out directly. You know, social media is a fantastic tool to kind of like cull large, you know, get stuff on a kind of quicker basis, but a good old fashioned phone call or meeting with somebody and kind of sitting down and talking about it in that way is still effective. You know, it's not something that you can always do because it does take a lot of time and commitment, but there's still a lot of value in just calling somebody up and talking through it that way. And then you can write your letter to the editor and rant about it.
Makes sense. Marcelo, I know you've run campaigns the old school way before. Is that still effective?
It's still very effective. I found a way to kind of continue to do both. I'm running 3 campaigns right now, and all 3 right now are finding a way to, you know, still put time into social media and still taking a percentage of that time to do the street campaign. The street campaigns are the most effective. I mean, you can't get better than that, but I think we all understand the reason to do more social media is because you can't reach everybody. I mean, there's no way possible. I think the numbers, we all know the numbers don't add up to try to go knock on 1,000 doors instead of sending out a Facebook ad or Instagram ad, you know, that will go out and hit 1,000 people in a few seconds. And so it's tiring, but what I noticed is a lot of people still want to hold on to a piece of that. And so what we've done is just lower the percentage and lower the amount of doors, or be really strategic about where we target. So if I'm gonna run social media ads, then I may run it towards a targeted group of people, but then I may come back and say, well, what group in this race needs to see this person? What's the group in this race that probably don't know this person or really needs to see this person? And kind of going through that list. And that's a hard thing to do because everybody wants to see a candidate. But once you kind of dive into it and dive real deep, you could sometimes figure out, well, you know what? This person needs to see a population of 20 to 30 years old, or this person needs to see that, and we'll try to get a list, cut a turf cut off of those people and make sure those candidates see those people instead of trying to see the whole universe of voters.
Makes sense. Huh? So now we're going to pivot back towards youth. I hope that with those insights, our young people watching this, and now or in the future will kind of have a better idea what to do if they have to target an older audience. But we definitely have to organize young people, and young people have to organize themselves, right? So now we're gonna ask the same question, but like, how do we draw the line between informative and entertaining, right? Because that's something that I've seen just a lot of campaigns fail at trying to be funny, trying to be super creative, and sometimes they don't get to their ultimate goal that they are trying to reach. So I would like to hear y'all's insight into how to draw that line between entertaining and informative, and how to reach out to young people in a meaningful way at the same time that they're getting something that they actually want to watch. Ashley, we'll start with you.
That's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer for that one yet. But I do think that, to me, and what we've seen following, this last election and everything that's happened in the past few months, there's a lot of misinformation, and social media has driven most of that. So the responsibility of being able to engage young people in a meaningful way, but doing it with integrity and the fact checking that is necessary, I don't know exactly how I'm trying to put this, but I think integrity is the biggest part of it, that you do want to be funny and attract people and have the most views and the most watches and, beat the algorithm, but you have to have some honest facts and journalism and truthfulness behind those things. And I think that the younger generation respects that, and they see your crazy uncle who's gone down the rabbit hole of every conspiracy because it pops up in his feed. And so he's following the news that pops up in his feed and not the actual news. So it's definitely hard to do, but there are a lot of people doing it well. I just don't know that I have the total answer to that. I would just say try to be as engaging as possible and as interactive as possible, but don't forget that you always need to be truthful.
Thank you, Ashley. And definitely there is something to be said about integrity of information, and Ava, you work in the news, so you probably have insight, particularly good insight on this, and you mentioned TikTok before. In TikTok you can find accounts that are super engaging with really relevant information, and they and their next video from the same account is just a pet doing something strange, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you deal with this? To be an information provider, which is what you are.
Right. So there's a fine line between entertainment and making sure you get factual information out there about your platform and who you are and what you're pushing. I will say knowing or having a finger on the pulse of society during a certain time is so important. I believe there was a time where entertaining the audience was winning, but disinformation was out there, but people were laughing and they were saying, oh, I can relate to this person, and, I may not be into the political sphere, but, this person made me laugh. I'm going to vote for that person. And it may not have necessarily panned out the way those of us who were kind of focused in on facts and, a real platform and what the needs of Americans were at the time, or communities or your local area. It kind of baffled us. It was just like, okay, what are they looking for? So fast forward to 2015 to 2020, you have a different approach. It's okay, we are going to make sure, and by we, I mean social media platforms were more specific about not allowing misinformation to get out there, or they would immediately try to target that messaging and say, okay, this is the facts behind this message. If you want to know the facts behind this, go to this link. So, I mean, it's really important to understand how to really get the messaging out there by continuing to keep a level of integrity there. Like Ashley said, people respect that at the end of the day, and voters who really care about, you know, their elected officials, who's in office and what they can do for their community, they care about that integrity as well. So.
Thank you, Eva. And Zach, I imagine that this must feel like the hardest problem for you, given that the Savannah Morning News is such an established, beloved institution here. You probably cannot be as funny as some other outlets could be, but I imagine that you have an insight on how to be entertaining at the same time that you do your job.
I don't know. I'm pretty hilarious, so I'm okay. But no, it's tough. You know, at the end of the day, you want to be a you want to be a newspaper. You want to be respected, and you can't. You want to kind of toe that line between being, you know, part of a community, but also a little. You have to remove yourself a little bit, because at the end of the day, we're there to hold, you know, public officials, hold people accountable. That's our job at the end of the day, and it's tough. You know, I think that I think honestly, you know, we there's a lot of focus on the bad of social media, and there's a lot of bad, but there's also, you know, when those floodgates opened and everybody else was able to kind of get in on sharing information, it's also really opened up some people to, you know, opened people up to the fact that there's people who are very focused on, you know, on these facts, on what they need to know. And that's been really nice to see for me. You know, I've seen a lot. I think that honestly, it was much more restrictive when you only had a newspaper, a radio station, and a TV station, because then you're only getting your information from those feeds, and those feeds are coming from an apparatus of some, you know, some boss up, you know, somewhere else who has their agenda in mind. And so now, yes, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of agendas out there, but at least there's a little bit more democracy in that than having the three big, you know, studios kind of running the show. And so for me, you know, here it's like, you know, it's nice. We're not the New York Times. We're not the Washington Post. We're not this big apparatus. We're just the Savannah Morning News. And so we have that ability to kind of really narrowly focus on what affects our community, what are people worried about, and how can we best explain that and get that into the hands of people who need to know that information.
So there is a place for useful information. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, that's a long way of telling you. Yeah.
That's good to know. A lot of times, you know, I forget it sometimes, you know. So Marcelo, you know, doing campaigns, I know a lot of candidates are always trying to go viral, right? Like that's like the main thing. Is that a worthy goal to pursue, or do you think like sticking to the issues, you know, will make it? You know, how do you approach this?
I think you stick to the basics. I think that's the way to lose a campaign is to try to do too much. You see it a lot, and sometimes you may hear people talk about pandering for the vote. Essentially, that's what it is. I've seen it. I think we've all seen who work campaigns on all sides of it, where you try to do too much. I've been in campaigns when, let's say, I mean, when you're working on a campaign, you know what your target audience is supposed to be. And so you go and try to develop something for that target audience. But if you're not in that audience, so if I'm a Black guy that's looking for a white vote, and, you know, of course, if I go out there and essentially try to do something to get a vote and try to make myself as if I'm a part of that community to get that vote, then I'm kind of pandering for the vote. Vice versa, I've been in communities where I've seen a white person come to Black vote and say, well, no, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna come to the Juneteenth event that I never came to, but not now I'm gonna come there. Is what I'm gonna do when I'm gonna get there. You know, it's certain things that you like, come on now, you know, you just do something basic. And so we see a lot of campaigns that people are trying to pander. The thing is, the campaign itself is still the same. And if you stick to the basics, you find an issue, you analyze that issue, you develop a strategy on that issue, you plan, then you do delivery on that issue, and you evaluate, and you rinse and repeat, and you continue to do the same thing. If you continue to stick in that circle, those ideas and strategies are going to come over there that's going to relate to different communities that you're trying to impact and affect. And once you do that, people will see a genuine side of you that you don't have to do anything but stick to the basics.
You know, I really like that the four of you have mentioned in one way or another the importance of being genuine. You know, and I think that's something that people can always see. You know, people can always see through you if you are, you know, saying BS, right? I mean, they want a genuine person, a genuine candidate, a genuine campaign, a genuine nonprofit, a genuine grassroots organization to support. You know? In that angle, I wanted to ask you a little bit about targeting, right? Because a lot of the discussion that is always around social media is about, you know, like knowing your audience. We said it here before today, you know. So what are the steps that you take in your job to like figure out your audience? I would like to know if you're just looking for demographics, if you're looking for patterns, where do you look, how do you look to understand the audience that you're shooting for? And I am sorry that I keep on going back, Ashley, to you first, but that is I think you're being a great conversation starter. So.
So for me, because I have been more on the campaign and advocacy side of things, my primary background is in fundraising and events. So there are very specific people in that situation that you'd be looking for. But I do think demographics in general are extremely important. Voting history, like most all campaigns, and any kind of party entity is going to have access to voting history of every person, and you can run all kinds of great analysis and demographics and list off of that to just see, you know, if you want to target, depending on who the candidate is and or the issue in particular, do you want to target people of a certain age or people of a certain ethnicity? Like what is your message and who is going to be that appeal to the most? So I do think knowing who you're going after is important, but also being very mindful that just like Marcelo was saying, that you can't craft a message that's not genuine if you're not incorporating people who are part of that community. So just saying I'm going after a group of women in their 40s, so I'm going to put, you know, I'm going to have a wine tasting is, you know,
I'm pretty sure that will work though. I know you're kidding, but
work.
I think that will work. Yeah.
I've never said no to one. I don't know. But, you know, you have to still be mindful that you're being as inclusive as possible, but that you're targeting the people who are going to be valuable to whatever the message is that you're trying to create. So maybe you do different campaigns for different groups. I would definitely approach a group of women in their 40s differently than a group of college students, for sure. So knowing your audience, again, using those demographics, most local organizations have access to a lot of that data, and you can actually find out a lot about people from just their voter registration. So we know a lot of background using that kind of data. So in my world, that's the most important data that you would need to kind of figure out where
I wanted to ask you that before we go to Ava, is that you mentioned that in your world you are doing fundraising, so you're looking for people who donate. I'm pretty sure that people listening to this will probably want to do some fundraising of their own.
Sure.
What will be the first step to follow through to find these people?
I can't give away all my secrets. That's the hard part. So definitely knowing the history of the donor and tailoring your ask to that person. If you're going to ask somebody for $100, you can definitely do that on Instagram. If you're going to ask somebody for more money, then you need to have a sit down face-to-face conversation with them, like we were saying before. But I do think that social media is a great platform for events and just getting the message out there. And I honestly think that COVID has opened up a new realm of virtual events like this Zoom that we're having now. It's so much more accessible for a lot of people who wouldn't be able to drive to Atlanta to go to a fundraiser, but they can log in, you know, from the comfort of their own home. So we've provided now with a lot of additional tools for virtual meetings, social gatherings that are online that give you access to people who might be interested and want to make a donation in a virtual capacity, which is something that hasn't happened before. But it's kind of a new world for that. The only thing I will say really quickly that that is harder for a fundraiser and an event planner, it's awesome to promote your events through social media, but it's really hard to plan an event solely based on social media because you just honestly don't know if people are actually going to show up. Ghosting is a real thing, not only in our personal lives, but in the political world
Whoa.
too, and in social media. People are very
Whoa.
easy to say, like, people will definitely say, oh yeah, I'm gonna come and RSVP online, but then they don't show up. So it has made event planning a lot more difficult, I will say.
Well, thankfully, it's not happening to us today. We already
Right?
have 30 participants online.
That's
Probably a lot
awesome.
of people are going to see it on Facebook. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Ava, so in your take, in the news, like how do you target the content that you produce?
So my answer is going to be a little shorter. We are a little bit lucky because people call us and tell us what their issues are. So we don't necessarily have to really target. Sorry about that. We don't necessarily, can you guys still see me? Yes. We don't necessarily have to really target anyone because they kind of come to us and they tell us, what their issues are and what they want answers to. Like Ashley said, inclusivity is so important when getting your messaging out, but obviously, like we said before, just be genuine, be yourself, but also know that you are a candidate for all people. But I would suggest having town halls as well, or going on your local news station and having a town hall there so people can really, get in there and ask you the questions that they have burning inside of them. And then polling. Constantly poll, hey, where do you stand on this issue? What are you looking for? What do you need? What are your needs in your neighborhood? So that's really my answer.
Do you run the polls yourself? I mean, the organization themselves, or you contract somebody outside to poll?
Well, for us, we can run the polls for Twitter, or we can put something on our news station. Hey, we're going to put a question up here. You guys call us. You let us know, what you're thinking regarding this. Or we reference one of our universities, reputed universities, who kind of conduct that polling in that area.
Well, that is good. I mean, that's probably something that we should go deeper into. How to get engagement. You get feedback from the public. We're just throwing information, but we're also absorbing from them. And Zach, is that something that you've also been able to do with your job, or what is your methodology for targeting?
Yeah, I mean, we've done that. We've done, panel events similar to this where we just kind of bring people out to just talk. But, to me, I think what's most important is just kind of, again, going back to sitting down and talking with somebody, whether that's on the phone or just face to face, just kind of hearing from people who have their, ears on the ground, are understanding what's happening in the community. I think that's probably the best way, and social media can kind of facilitate that because you can see who's doing that through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. I get a lot of ideas and news tips from there because people are seeing what people are saying on there, and then I'll follow up with them and kind of have a longer conversation to be like, I think a lot of those I start with just what do you think we should be doing, again, that kind of adds that level of investment for them because they feel like they're a part, they're going to let us do our job, but they're also a part of the conversation as well. I think that's important because, you want that buy-in so that it's not just like we're using you to answer a questionnaire and then move on. It's like, no, you're invested in the process as well. And so that's something that's kind of important when we try to target people. You
mentioned algorithms before. Is that something that you are always aware of when you are trying to reach out to a specific audience?
Yeah, you gotta, it's kind of, you gotta understand the beast in order to monitor, work it. So, I mean, I have a pretty strong understanding of how to use SEO so that we can, optimize our search in the best way. I mean, that's, if anything, that's where the game's at least when it comes to getting information out, is understanding how Google search works in the best way. But, talking about all of those things, it's honestly a little depressing, because it's like, you got to understand the Google algorithm, you got to understand the Instagram algorithm, you got to understand the Facebook algorithm, because all of these systems kind of, facilitate how we get that information out. And so understanding how those work and what those specific platforms are looking for in terms of ads and posts and things like that, it's crucial. It's just, incredibly important.
Will you define SEO for our audience?
Search engine optimization, which is a really, million-dollar term. Pretty much that is a lot of the text that Google is pulling from to give you kind of a ranking, so that whenever you Google Deep Center, depending on how they've done their SEO, that whenever you Google that information in the way that they've kind of ranked that will pop up, and that's all based on an algorithm based at what is it, Palo Alto or wherever Google's at. So.
No. All right, that is good to hear. So Gonzalo, we got to you because you had a lot of experience, doing this kind of work, in a direct manner. How do you go about, and this really started with your insight about how to reach out to a specific demographic. How is it that you go about it? How is it that you target them and craft a message for them?
Right, and again, it depends on the candidate and who the candidate is. Once we find out who the candidate is, we kind of break the candidate down into different areas. What is his race? What is his or her ethnicity? What is his or her religion? What schools did this person go to? What any affiliation? What area side of town this person stay on? What does this person eat all the time? All of those things you can find a way to target. You could go and run Facebook ads right now, and I could target, American food or Japanese food, and I can find people who like that food, who may vote for my candidate just because they eat the same food. So we can break that down, but it's a few steps. It's one, finding that about the candidate, and then finding which one of those audiences do we need to focus on. Two, breaking those audiences down into two different things. I don't care what kind of campaign you run on the political side, it's going to get broken down to two categories: diehard supporters, undecided swing votes. Everything that happens going to fall into those two categories. So if I'm a diehard supporter, the marketing that person and advertising that person may be a little different from what an undecided swing voter at, who needs to hear more from me, need to hear more about my story, need to maybe have that touch, kind of like I said earlier, this is a person that my candidate needs to see. Then once I get to those two things, and out of those lists that I break down to different target groups, now I want to see how much money I need to spend in each one of those groups, or how much money as a whole that I want to spend in targeting, and then what kind of events can I do for each one of those groups. So if I'm targeting Ashley's because she went to Beach High School, which is the best school in Savannah, if I'm targeting Ashley for that, but maybe I want to look at Beach Alumni Association and find out how I can send ads to them, or send some things their way. The last thing I'm doing is find out who does Ashley need to see and not see out of those groups. So Ashley may be a person that's already affiliated with the high school, but she don't mind me sending a surrogate to her church because she's been there a lot. So like those kind of things. And once I figure that out, now I can help kind of graph a calendar for my candidate, and then I can actually want to target ads off of what the least amount of time I think my candidate is spending.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, and it works the same way for advocacy campaigns, right? I mean, I think it's important for us to realize that when we're talking about campaigns, we're not just talking about candidates. It can be like issue-based. It can be, campaigns like the ones that SAC runs for the morning news. There are many types of campaigns that we can be engaged in, and we really hope that all of our attendance today, and people that are watching this, can take some of these takeaways, to whatever it is that they want to do. And I want to take it to the dark corner of the internet for a minute now, which is, bad faith actors, people who will troll online, people who will try to take down your campaign, people who will take down to take down your issue or engage in discussions that are never going to go anywhere. We've all seen people who get into comment sections without the intention of providing information at all. They just want to win the argument by being the last person commenting there and things like that. This is probably why some of the platforms who don't allow for commenting as much are more engaging for some people. So I just wanted to get your take really quick on how to deal with those situations when you get targeted, by bad faith actors, that are trying to change the direction of the discourse that you're doing, because we apparently always seem to find people like that in the internet. So Ashley, let's start with you. I don't know if you ever had an experience like that, either for work or personally, but how will you say that young people, if they are doing an advocacy campaign, how they should deal with it?
Yeah, that's a tough one because there's so much of that out there, and it's hard sometimes to know when it's a legitimate question or conversation that someone's trying to start, or if it's just a spam or bot online bully kind of situation. I tend to not engage with those people unless it's a genuine question that you think you can answer in a meaningful way. I delete them, I block them, I don't engage, because most of the time it's just a troll or someone kind of trying to dominate the conversation, and it's only going to get ugly. So I say 90% of the time you shouldn't engage with those people. I just honestly, especially if you're in the media or a candidate or someone in an official role and you feel like you have to address the issue, do it very honestly, bluntly, simply once, and then move on. Don't banter back and forth with people like that, because it's just never going to go anywhere, and it's going to detract from what your true message is. So I say don't engage.
I am taking tallies now. You're a yes, I'm blocking. All right.
Yes, I'm for blocking. I'm for deleting blocking.
Ava, how do you feel about this? Are you a blocker, or you let him talk?
I'm a blocker. So
for blocking.
Yes, for trolls, you definitely just want to block them. They are distraction, major distraction. If they're not adding to the conversation, if they're not simply asking a meaningful question, you just want to kind of get them out of the way and make room for those who really have a real question for you as a candidate, so that you can go in and, answer that. Now, of course, you don't want to block those who may disagree with you or may not be a fan of yours. You want to go in and just provide facts. Every time they come with some information, hey, I heard, or I saw, or didn't you have this, or wasn't this in your background? Just provide facts and maybe a link, and then keep it moving. That's my biggest advice. But yes, block the trolls.
Thank you, Ava. Zach, I imagine that you deal with this on the regular, so I will let you answer however you feel is best without getting in trouble.
We're already short on that. Now, I was gonna say I've never run into a troll on a newspaper Facebook page. Never. That's never happened. Yeah, go ahead and check me down for block. I got no time for that. I mean, like, there are people who they'll ask a question, and I've, in the years that I've run the Facebook page for the morning news, I've like responded to it with, here's an article on this. Here's a little explainer of like what you're asking. And some of them kind of, push it off because they just wanted to use it as an excuse to kind of take shots. But some of them, it does change their mind, but that's far and few. A lot of them, they just want to come and create problems. And I'm not going to give them the oxygen to do that. So just kind of move on.
I hear you. Marcelo, are you going to be the one that engages with the trolls, or are you going to completely annihilate them?
So I'm happy to be the oddball. I'm engaged with them for a little while. it's worked well for me on several times. For the most part, social probably 60% of the campaign when I'm working a political campaign. So maybe different on other campaigns, but for the most part, that's what I'm dealing with mostly all the time. Events come every once in a while, but social media is all day long. These are things I do know. Most of the time, those comments do not affect the outcome of the election. They don't influence as many people as we think they do at the same time as well too. Now, I'm not saying sit and get harassed too. Now, you're getting harassed, yeah, block. But a lot of times they don't. Sometimes we could just ignore the post, and then sometimes we have to be honest, and the criticism is justified. If somebody come and say, "Listen, I've never seen my community before," and yeah, you probably don't want to hear that. You're thinking, yeah, but then maybe they never seen you in their community before, you know. And so we got to be honest about. I think a good candidate really looks at those things. But certain things that you should do. One, you take the time to answer the post if you want to ask them that first time around. I think a lot of time we lash out. That first initial response is usually not what you probably should say or want to say. So taking that breath and typing out a nice response would be good. When you do the responses, you know, we kind of train them to kill them with kindness and use humor. Humor always works for the most part. And another thing is, you know, you sometimes encourage your followers to leave a positive comment too. So don't let your followers attack them as well too. Just say, hey, you know, listen, that person just misunderstood. They didn't know the issue. I'm gonna try to give them the right information, but he's a constituent. She's a constituent in our district, and they should have their feelings addressed too. And so, lastly, I'd rather just hide the ad. I'd rather hide the ad a lot of times than block it, because people use blocking as a way to saying that a candidate is weak. So look, y'all, they blocked me. They won't let me post. They won't let me comment. Well, I can just hide the ad and no one's going to see it anyway. So those are some tactics that I prefer to use.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said also that if some people are commenting, your post is gonna be bumped up, you know. So if there is a reasonable level of discussion, sometimes, you know, that could be productive. So, or I guess I do like to argue too. So Marcelo, I've been that kind that doesn't block them just because I want to answer them as well. Yeah, I know. So, but yeah, they're definitely, if they are harassing, you know, or actually trolling, I would absolutely agree with the majority of our panelists that they should be blocked. You know? With that being said, we're getting into the end of this part of the event. I will ask anybody who has questions to please put them on the chat. Coco will be compiling them for us, and we will be doing the Q&A section of this event. The last question that I have, you know, without getting into the audience just yet, is literally just to ask you, what are the takeaways, not the takeaways, what are the main things that you will tell a young person that is organizing a grassroots organization, or that are advocating for an issue in their neighborhood, or that are advocating for a change of policy, or that are just starting to work with another organization that wants to do this? What are the things that you really hope that they will do so that they are most successful at their goals? You know? And Ashley, I'll start with you.
I'm gonna go first on this one. I gotta think for a second. First of all, I just want to say that I think it's amazing that there are so many young people on this call today, and so many young people in general right now that are taking an interest in making their communities a better place to live. And the work that you do at the Deep Center, I think, is wonderful, and it's inspiring to see another generation who wants to be involved. And I would say, know that that matters and that your voice can be heard. And even though it's hard sometimes to get started and to make a dent and to feel like you're making an impact, you definitely are. There's nothing too small. So I would say meet as many people as you can, get to know other people from other backgrounds who are maybe interested in the same issues that you are. Find people that you can surround yourself by to be supportive of you and to be good mentors for you. And then just jump out there and do it. Like, make sure that your voice is being heard. Social media is a great avenue for that. But also just being involved in local organizations at your school and in your community is a great way to get started as well. So go for it. I think it's awesome that there are so many people on this call that would be interested.
Isn't it great? I'm always surprised.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved when I was that young. Ava, what are your main points for a new organizer, a new digital organizer? What is it that you think they should do? Oh no, I think she's gone.
I think we could lose her.
Nope, I'm here. I have no, there are no questions in the Facebook chat.
No, it's I was sending it to Ava. I think her connection must have lost. All right, Zach, what are your main points for new people?
Yeah, I think Ashley hit on a lot of good ones. So definitely take those. I think one also, and I think it's key to what we've talked about, is just, you know, be a good listener. Like, listen to people. You know, take time to just kind of soak in what others are saying. You kind of get, you know, you'll get the good and the bad, but you got to understand that and learn what the differences there. And so, you know, find opportunities, whether you're going to events or you're participating in things like this, or you're talking to new or different people, you know, take that time to just kind of sit back and, you know, pull yourself out of the conversation a little bit and let them talk and just listen and get to know them. Because I think being that kind of fly on the wall really pays off a lot. It makes you a good journalist. So.
Spoken like a true journalist. Ava, I think you're back now. I see you back. Ava, you there?
Hi, if you're asking me a question, I didn't hear.
All right, now you're back. No, it's just the last question was, what are the things that you would like a young organizer to walk out of this event with? What is it that you think they should go about starting a campaign, you know, for an issue, for their neighborhood, whatever? What is it you think are the key points for digital organizing that they should take away from this?
What should a young organizer do to start a campaign digitally? Is that your question?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes. So widespread messaging and consistent messaging is really important when launching a digital campaign for their candidate. Again, consistent messaging, understanding who your candidate is and what draws voters to that person, and just kind of building that platform off of that. And just being consistent with that messaging is what a young organizer should consider when launching their campaign.
All right, thank you so much. Gonzalo, last question. What are your your points for a new organizer to start with?
I would say the first is do your research. I think several people kind of hinted at, but do your research. Learn about who you're working with or why you're working. A bigger point to me is take your emotions out of it. You know, sometimes we let our emotions take over facts and science. When an example, if I'm dealing with a campaign and I know that it's 100,000 people in that district and more than likely 70,000 is not going to vote for me or my candidate, as great as I think I am as a person or a candidate or whoever, I should probably just not run that race because I'm just not going to win that race. And sometimes we let emotions like, oh yeah, I can do it, you know, but sometimes we got to take emotions out of it. And kind of like the last thing, listen for consistent messaging. And I think Ava said it just now, but consistent messaging is probably the best thing you could do for any campaign to win, whether it be a political campaign or any campaign, but consistent messaging is the most important.
Is it Marcelo who froze, or was it me who froze? It was him. Okay.
Did I freeze?
All right, you're back.
Okay. But consistent messaging, I think, was my last part I said.
100%. Consistency ends up being by far the most important thing in all this. It has been also my experience. I would just like to end this conversation, if there are no questions or any further comments from our panelists or anybody who else who is in the call, is that the algorithms that Zach was talking about before, they have changed a lot over the years. I remember when in Facebook you were able to like create a fan page and take it to 30,000 followers in 6 months, you know, just by posting a couple memes, right? And that was really a thing, you know, back in 2011 or 2012, you know. And now Facebook does not allow you to like grow at all unless you're paying. You know? And the same thing, it used to be much easier to create accounts on Twitter and to follow each other and stuff like that. You know, now, you know, Twitter has, you know, getting a lot smarter too. And it's likely that all these platforms will be changing, you know, as they grow, you know, and they become more efficient and taking money out of people. You know? So I really like that our 4 panelists today have had a real world experience of realizing that a lot of these things have to be organic. You know, there has to be like a community backbone to this. A lot of the conversation has always gone back to like actually build a relationship, you know, actually, you know, make the call, actually knock on the door, actually be out there and talking to people, because it doesn't matter the platform that you're using, you're always wanna end up having to rely on that. So if anything, social media becomes a super important tool to expand the message and start those relationships that we have to build. Coco, I see your hand up.
Yep, we have a question from the chat, and it is: do you see the power or influence of celebrity dying, or at least waning within the next decade, considering the disaster that was a social media response from celebrities to the June protest?
Does anybody want to tackle that?
Yeah.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah, I definitely don't see it dying at all. I mean, so social media and social media influencers is going to continue to kind of create the narrative that we do anything with over the next few years. It's nothing that we're going to see go away anytime soon in the next maybe 10, 15 years. We've always, the response to some of the stuff and seeing some of the stuff was, you know, I think not what some of us expect or used to seeing, but on the other end, if you follow, and I do follow the tech companies, so I kind of know what Facebook and these other groups are doing to prevent and to curb certain things, so that we can prevent you know, things that would be an endangerment to the community and people. I think that's a good thing personally. However, I don't see it dying at all. If anything, it's gonna bulk up 10 times more.
Ashley, you got a comment about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. I don't see that necessarily dying in the next decade or waning in the next decade, but I do think who those people are has changed a lot, and who we view as a celebrity, that definition is a lot different now. So definitely the people who have the most influence in social media are not necessarily the people you would think of as celebrities, so to speak. So I do think that who influencers are is going to change, but there are always going to be those people with the mass followings that are going to get heard.
And I guess that's a question that I have for all of you. It's about the influencers. Is it worthy to pay an influencer to support your campaign? Let's just, I don't know many influencers' names. Or let's say somebody who has 50,000 followers on Instagram. How far do you think it's helpful for a campaign? Is that something that you would recommend for people to do?
Definitely helpful. If you can get a celebrity endorsement or a major endorsement, it helps. I mean, we made some of us, so the way we got to look at it is most people, a lot of people who are familiar with that campaign, whether it be a political campaign or eSplosh campaign, it doesn't matter. The 10 to 20% who's familiar with it, no, it's not going to influence them at all because they're familiar with it. They know what's going on. They know how they're going to vote. But let's be honest with you, on the average campaign, there's 60% maybe even that do not know what's going on. So they are waiting for someone to kind of point them in the right direction. And if it will come down to if a celebrity or a popular person or a friend for that matter, that can tell you like, you should go this way right here because this is what I believe. You should go this way right here because it's me when I'm popular. Then most of the time those folks would go in that direction. That's why it's big money behind these celebrity endorsements, and that's why it's big money. I mean, most of a campaign, we spend the first few months of a campaign before we even think about events, thinking about who would endorse us. You know, what person came to get to endorse us, and that's really important for a campaign.
It's definitely important. Coco, do we have any more questions anywhere?
No more questions.
No more questions. All right. I think that's pretty much we got for an event. Is there any last comments any of the panelists would like to make? All right. Ava, go ahead.
I want to thank you guys for inviting us to speak to the students today. This is so important, and I'm glad that you guys are providing this platform for them. I mean, this is really a rare opportunity to kind of gain insight from professionals in the field to apply in real life right now, and they can take this with them throughout their career. So this was awesome.
Thank you so much. There was really a really enriching opportunity. And this will be available on Facebook for anybody that wants to see it. It has been recorded as well. So if anybody would like to have this on their hard drive for some reason, we can absolutely provide that for you. Thank you so much to Savannah State folk for the outreach. Thank you to everybody who follows Deep Center out there in the internet. And if you need to do anything with us, you can always reach out to our website, deepcenter.org. You of course know how to reach out to Savannah State. Thank you so much, Ashley, Zach, Marcelo, Ava, and everybody in the staff of Deep Center that was involved in this, Coco, Martina, and all the students who showed up. Thank you so much. You all have a great day.
Yeah.